Hello and welcome back to Round 2 Back 9 MPO lead card coverage of the 2024 Järva Open Tyyni, an exciting tournament here in Stockholm, Sweden, and fantastic lead card we have for you here today on MDG Media. I'm Connor Wood, and with me, Elias Luukkonen.
What's up, Connor? What's up, viewers? Nice to be here once again in our very professional kids' room studio.
No doubt, it's an exciting weekend full of action on a very historic and legendary course. I think all of us really feeling honored to be playing here and on a fantastic layout. A few changes made this year to keep players on their feet, but overall it's the Järva we know and love. Talk to us about the standings.
Yeah, a lot of moving on the front nine, not by our players. Everybody on our card not starting off super hot, but also not starting off terrible, but everybody else in the field is absolutely scoring. So many 6-unders. Morten Brenda with the course record 11 under. Some hot scores as well, and yeah, it's gonna be all about these players trying to keep pace with the rest of the field. Ironically, them being the lead card and trying to keep pace with the rest. Moving on to hole number 10, what do you think of this one?
It's an interesting hole. It's a 112-meter par 3, OB lining the left, although not really coming into play. There's a pretty precise gap players want to hit off the tee with a long hyzer. Anything that flips up to flat will catch this rightwards tree line, and anything hyzering too early won't crest over this hill. With a really tricky and dangerous green as well, one of the only on the back nine. It's a hole that demands a lot of angle control, a little bit of luck, and ultimately a good putt. Very rare that this one is totally parked.
For sure, and Eeku there, that's an early release. You really rather want to push the backside trees than releasing early. And even LEnni here, a little bit of the same problem. You see the big tree on the left side of the screen right now. That is really the tree that you're aiming at and just trying to hyzer right before it. Ideally to give yourself a chance to be in the circle.
Joona here using the width available to him much lower, trying to get some ground play here. He does crest over just barely, has the juice to give himself an open look to the green. Going to be looking downhill though, will be a dangerous putt, although I think he's certainly looking to attack Daniel here. A more traditional looking line in terms of height and hyzer. He just needs to beat the tree line and then let the hill filter his disc. He's also just outside the circle.
Yeah, really not a bad result there for both Joona and Daniel. As you mentioned, a really difficult hole to park. And not that many birdies here, only 18% of the field getting to birdie here. Eeku, this is a touchy shot from the knee. He needs to keep it short enough. And while that was short enough, a horrendous roll off the tree. I'd call that very unlucky.
Certainly that right side though, if you catch any of those trees, your disc will not settle quickly. You're lucky if it's just a few meters. Hjalmar there, able to settle it. We go now to Eeku.
Yeah, Eeku there, just outside the bullseye. Fortunately for him, able to just pitch up under the basket, and let's see the birdie runs here. Joona first from C2, look at that putt.
Absolutely incredible commitment to the spin there, just in the heart. We see a very similar putt that he's had on the front nine and beginning to pay off now. Daniel, in comparison, a little bit more timid on that release and just slightly early to the left. This is LEnni now.
There you go, good for the par. And about Daniel's release, that was a bit timid, but I feel like many of his putts on the front nine had the same sort of issue. Looking just slightly nervous, not quite as comfortable on the green as on the drives. And I feel like he could definitely be 2, 3, even 4 under par if his putts had been dropping the way that they have for some of our other competitors.
For a long time, statistically, he's been one of the strongest tee to green players in the field. When he puts the short game together, dangerous man. This is certainly a hole here where tee to green is important. Hole 11, a downhill 145-meter par 3. In terms of power, probably only needing about 120, maybe 115, even if you get the angle right. But more importantly is making sure to combat this right to left slope, as any backhand for the right-handed player that catches any air will often fade way down there. A lot of players are going to be playing an understable or stable disc on a long anhyzer angle, just trying to catch a long glide to the right, settle soft. Another one that's very tricky to park, but definitely attackable given the only real obstacle is that one large dead tree players are going to try to end right of. This is very high for Joona, and if it doesn't have enough turn, will find some fade down the hill, but so softly moving. Really nice flat landing.
Showcasing that angle control, that I feel like that is the single best thing about Joona's game, that great angle control. And of course for LEnni it's much more of a simple hole, just trying to throw a huge glidey hyzer with a relatively stable disc. I'd say that's a good shot, but not a great shot. For the lefty, you would really love to be in the circle here. And the forehand from Daniel takes a lot of distance. I'm interested to see if he gets it all the way there.
It looks like he may have, but that single guardian that I mentioned, catching him there, he looks to be still outside circle 2. Eeku going to be shaping the backhand and has a good height on this. Flat to slightly nose down with the turn, long drift to the right and some slightly late stability. He will also be left with a long look. No one really getting the complete distance here to have a straightforward putt.
Yeah, I think the forehand is playing really far, and both Eeku and Joona look to be going with mid-ranges there, which I believe is a great play to control that angle here. LEnni from just outside the circle, about 12 meters. And Eeku, he had a couple of good putts on the front. And this is another one of them. That was a perfect putt, nothing wrong with that. Pretty fast on the pace, but perfectly on the pole.
Yeah, it was low, it was finishing downwards, and Joona in for the birdie is able to secure the 2 here on hole 11. Although it's really not too much danger, Elias, I can imagine there weren't too many birdies. How was it statistically?
You're dead on that one. 75% par on this hole and only 13 birdies in the field. So definitely a difficult hole to birdie. But if you do make a mistake, it's almost always just a par. So open, really no OB that comes into play. And I think that's more or less going to be the theme for the back nine for these players. Of course, a lot of the other players in the field are struggling with the longer par 4s that we have coming up. But for these players, they are good with their angles, have a lot of distance. They can tear this back nine apart if their drive is feeling good. And that is definitely the theme on hole number 12. Long par 4 of 240 meters, but playing very short with the downhill. You can even almost get it to jump putt distance if you want to flex it off the tee. A lot of players though playing just an overstable hyzer to the middle, leaving themselves with a 60 to 70 meters approach to the green that is quite well protected and has OB just about 5 meters behind.
Yeah, I would say that any shot that's a decent drive inbounds will create a birdie chance, but the upshot really tends to be the deciding factor on how much of a healthy bid they'll have. And Joona has just hit this into the perfect spot. As you mentioned, probably just a jump putt approach. Really impressive display of his hyzer power. LEnni having to shape this a little more as a left-handed backhand player. He is gliding over OB right now, the fairway, green rather, of the previous hole. Doesn't swing it back in bounds in time. That is the danger of his play, and any disc that gets a bit too nose down tends to find a lot of turn here.
And definitely a trickier hole for the lefty with a left to right slope on the fairway. Daniel here going for a big shot. Another player with a lot of power, just like Joona Heinänen, and also a great drive. I think he doesn't have more than 30 meters from there, really showcasing how short this hole can play for the biggest arms of the field.
Eeku asking it to swing in before the tree, and you see him do just that. Also flipping the catch cam. All of those guys will be having a short chip shot or jump putt into the green. And pretty textbook execution from the majority of the field. Only LEnni finding some trouble. Going to be playing the spiking forehand hyzer. What's important to see here is that he controls the speed on the OB long, and exactly that can happen just so quickly if you hit the green with that high-speed driver.
Yeah, very easy mistake to make. And that's why these players from this position would like to go for that softer forehand. But Eeku just not hitting the line. He's going to be in that ginormous bush in the middle of the fairway at the very end. That's the main obstacle on the approach. And as expected, Daniel just a jump putt. Joona just a little step, and he's in the bullseye, just outside the bullseye for the birdie there.
You see him putting together the back nine really nicely so far. Already picking up 2 birdies, that will be his 3rd in a row. And a little scuba putt there for Eeku, not having the stroke with that defensive hedge. And bogey tap in there for LEnni. Hole 12, really, honestly, a solid birdie get. And for these guys who are throwing particularly far, very manageable if you can control the drive well.
Absolutely. Any hole that the biggest drivers can put within jump putt distance is going to be a hole that they really want to get, especially with not that tight of an OB. We're going to have some holes on the back with slightly tighter OB, but really most of the back it's all about controlling your angles and finding the landing zones. As we see Hjalmar Fredriksson, very hot round of 8 under, only through 13.
Here we are on hole 13. Quite a difficult par 4 to birdie, a lot of danger, but if you can stay within the fairway, it is there. 229 meters playing back now in the other direction. The OB lines both the left and the right, and as a result, players will really be punished for shots that come in fast into this short grass. You see quite a lot of ground play on this softly right to left sloping hole, and you have this green tucked away behind the final guardian trees with OB close behind it. Probably the most sloped area of the hole here on the green.
Off the tee, there's a big risk of your long drive that is perfectly on the fairway ending up in one of those small bushes that there are plenty of on the fairway. Joona here, this is too low. Needs to finish back in bounds, and a pretty fortunate break to just barely hit the first bushes and even bouncing off the last ones. As Daniel, great correction there, much better height on the shot.
Gets it up to flat and then finding the late stability. Fantastic angle control to really never move right but manage the width very well. Eeku as well here, getting a soft touch of Anheuser with a stable disc. Again, very nice height to ensure he finishes left in time. Another great shot.
It's going to be just under 100 meters for all of those players, maybe 90 left from there. And LEnni, for a lefty, it's a great shape of a hole. You can fly over the inbounds area for the entire way. Might have a bush in his way, or he might be able to hyzer around it. You never really know off the tee. All of these players are getting up to their discs and possibly being a little bit surprised with what sort of a line they have left.
Joona there with a nice looking shot, but not quite getting past the final tree that was in his line. Eeku here playing the pure hyzer, going to be having a brief flight time over out of bounds, but swinging back in and using the hillside to get that extra distance towards the pin. That's, I think, a pretty textbook way to play this hole with his 2 shots.
Yeah, I love the fact that he was able to land on the right side of the basket. And the forehand here, it's a good play. Does have a risk of roll away, but Daniel able to avoid that and really clean shot in the circle. Also with the lefty, I think the lefties, as with the backhand you can probably throw a slower disc. Chance of roll away is slightly smaller, though looks like not small enough, unfortunately, for LEnni. And this has a really bad angle, unfortunately. Rolling all the way towards the OB, and while he was in the circle for a brief moment, gonna be outside of circle 2 here.
And honestly, a healthy bid also keeps it close. Joona here to continue the birdie streak with this long putt. Just slaps down by the branch. Maybe dropping to a knee could have benefited him there, but still needing a lot of power and height Daniel, smooth and a good-looking correction to his putting stroke.
Yeah, very solid there. Going with a slight Anheuser release, which I know he has previously talked about that he doesn't really love that Anheuser release out of the hand, but when he's putting at his best, he'd rather release perfectly flat. And there you go there. Solid birdie to go back to 3 under. I'm pretty impressed actually with how Eeku is able to keep it together. You know, he's not the guy who's been on many lead cards, especially on this type of tournament, and he's playing solid.
Yeah, looks very relaxed, very composed, and still currently tied with Joona at 11 under. As we saw in the leaderboards, only one player from the chase card pushing ahead of them, but with more holes played, they're pretty much on pace at the lead position. We go into another very lengthy par 4 here, Elias. Do you want to break it down?
Yeah, hole 14, a really hole where all of our players have the opportunity to open up off the tee. 253 meters, you would like to bite off 130 or even 140 of those 253 off the tee, leaving yourself with somewhere between 105 and 120 meters for the approach. All about keeping it slightly on the right side of the fairway of the tee to avoid the left side bushes that can come into play if you fade out early. And then on the approach, most important thing, don't fade out early left because there are a lot of skips to be found if your disc comes in on a hyzer angle. Rather play it a little bit right with something straight that doesn't really fade that much.
Daniel here playing the wide hyzer, skips into that little bushed area, but going to be nicely between them to have an open throwing stroke. A lot of pretty good looking throws will end up slightly compromised in the angle or footing available to them because of those small bushes. They're just really in that sweet spot for the long hyzers to hit, and exactly done there by Eeku. He's going to have a very tight release space and going to be quite cramped.
And it's pretty scary to pull this hyzer far enough to the right, as Joona is making the same mistake, might even be left side of those bushes. Never mind, he's gonna be exactly in that area. You really have to put it out there far to the right if you wanna avoid to the bushes. And for the lefty, of course, pretty nice, fading away from the bushes, and this looks just perfect.
Yeah, the more right you can end, it really does open up the flight on the second shot, offering a much straighter look down the tunnel. All of these guys on the left near those little bushes are going to have to play sort of long hyzer, not really having a straight look. Joona here trying to use all of the width available to him, gets it nicely finishing leftwards at the end and just a little bit low to complete the full flight to the pin, but open look at the putt.
C2, he's hit a couple of solid ones from there already, even one terrible spit out on the front nine from outside of circle 1. And this shot from Eeku, I really love the angle control, finishing right side of the basket with just a small fade. Went with something pretty slow that doesn't really finish too far to the left.
Yeah, that was fantastic, especially with how pinched his throwing arm was on that thorny bush. Daniel, with a slightly less compromised look, just keeps it a little bit too low. Does not find the leftwards finish he was looking for. Also left with that long look.
And this is looking very dangerous. Great branch hit. I'm almost 100% certain had that disc come clean off the tree, probably would have been in the left side OB. So very lucky there from LEnni, and now he actually does have a chance to get the birdie from outside of C2. Another great bit. I feel like he's just a few centimeters off on all of those.
Yeah, and from what we've seen so far from LEnni, playing a lot of overstable shapes and plastic. Daniel with a beautiful delivery into the chains as he walks it in. Just look how many steps it takes for him to get to the basket. Really lengthy putt, and capitalizing in a good moment, we get another look here.
Great to see. Of course, he did miss some putts in the front nine, but possibly making up for at least one of those shorter misses. And now Joona not going with a step putt that he often does from C2, rather just a standstill one, and that's going to be a disappointing miss. It's a great hole for Joona, having great control over his distance drivers, and he's going to be losing that stroke to Eeku, going back to 11 under. Or even 12 under, I think.
And we see the putt from LEnni there. Is able to secure the par, that tree really giving him a fortunate break and able to break it down into the 4 shots. Joona as well. I think for the upper end of the field, pretty attackable hole, but if you're not comfortable throwing those 120, 130 hyzers, it can pretty quickly be dangerous. Hole 15, a very uniquely shaped fairway here. We have a tight inside hyzer off the tee. A lot of players will throw something slightly understable on a steep hyzer that will sort of late flip up to flat as they try to get around the bend. Players will have 2 options to access the green. As the drone is flying here in this horseshoe shape with 2 hyzers, the first one being kind of low, the second one more of a spike hyzer, the alternative is to get it far enough on the first past the mando tree and then shortcut through the woods. The course designer actually mentioning that is an intended line, despite there being visually no clear fairway, I think encourages the creativity that this hole can ask from the players.
And Daniel here, huge hyzer, a lot of distance. And now that he's out of the bush, that is gonna be the perfect spot, great angle. He's so far and so far to the right that his angle to the green is gonna be much straighter than you normally have on the hyzer. Same thing for Eeku here. Unfortunately for him though, he's gonna be in one of those bushes. That's really the dice you have to roll if you're throwing that long flip up and not finishing far enough to the left.
Joona significantly more inside on his hyzer, but does get that forward skip rather than left and sort of between Daniel and Eeku's lies. A tough hole for the lefty here with Obi lining the right side, going to be forced to play a long turnover roller. LEnni lays it down nicely and curling also into a pretty nice looking spot. Will have an abbreviated walk up, but does have the hyzer entrance into the green available to him, or hyzer, or right-handed. He may have to go with that forehand spike.
And look at this crafty play from Eeku going inside forehand roller, perfect angle. And look at the result. Beautiful, and not many players in the field even would have come up with the option of going for that shot. And I just found it so interesting that in the last round, all of our players in the feature card went through the woods to the left, and now everybody with perfect drives able to go for this line. And Daniel almost ringing it up for the eagle.
If you ever want to know how to play this hole, Daniel just showed us those 2 shots pretty much perfect. Joona here getting this slightly wider, going to be pushing the back tree line, but is able to filter through those branches and will be left with a birdie putt.
And LEnni as well, close enough to the corner that he's comfortable going with a forehand. A little bit short there. Interesting fact about LEnni's forehand, he's actually using the 1-finger grip, one of the few players in Europe that throw the forehand with only 1 finger in the rim, as Eeku Kölhi here. Another very composed looking putt there.
Yeah, it does not seem to be too affected here by the big stage. A smile on his face. He has put together 3 birdies in a row through a very tough stretch of holes. Really nicely done as we see these guys collect their birdie putts. Joona a little bit closer than it looked originally, in a really nice position. Left with that short delivery into the chains for his birdie as well. Getting himself to 6 under for the round here on 15. 3 holes left to go, as we'll see who can battle for these positions for lead card final day.
Another hole that is quite rarely birdied, only 20% of the field getting a birdie on this one. As we could see there, Hjalmar from the chase card kind of slowing down with a few pars in a row on this back 9. As we're moving on to a hole that you really don't want to take a par on, hole number 16. 194 meters, nothing in the way for the tee shot. Most players are playing a big hyzer. The further right you can be, closer to the right side OB, is going to be much better for the angle, as we're going to a protected green that really offers a straight shot if you're on the right side of the fairway, but if you're on the left side, a lot of players going over the trees, throwing a very tight low hyzer, a grenade over, hyzer, spike hyzer over. There's almost unlimited plays on this hole for the approach, but yeah, that's why the drive is so important. Just try to keep it far enough and to the right side of the fairway.
Daniel there has ended to the left. That will open up more of the spike hyzer angle for his approach. Eeku will see him control the width a little bit more here, but still enough height to ensure that you swing back in. I think while the right side helps, it's really not the priority, as you can birdie from pretty much anywhere down on this fairway. One of the easier playing holes. Joona as well getting this one straight down the middle. A little bit more of a flip up line as he contends with the left side OB but settles in time. Also that tree line on the left can come into play if you're pushing the distance. LEnni here is going to need to fade pretty quickly and downwards because the left-handed backhand with the left to right slope comes into play very quick, and we'll see him find that OB, although with a good angle into the green.
Yeah, pretty big mistake there. It's a wide fairway. A lot of room on either side to shape it with the hyzer. And Daniel going for the spike hyzer, very overstable disc here. Common play, you're just trying to crash those trees and hopefully filter through. He was a little bit outside, so wanted to be more left, where the trees that you're crashing are actually near the edge of the circle and not edge of circle 2.
LEnni as well playing the spike, although on the forehand. And that's nicely done. He really managed to get around that bunch of guardian trees. Eeku on the right side will have much more of a straight look, actually playing a soft turnover here, as he also has a great speed control to slide his way into the circle for the birdie putt. Joona, the furthest drive, but I think the worst angle into the green. Really vertical release.
And going with the regular hyzer compared to the upside down thrown one called a grenade, able to get some more forward ground play, and he's gonna be just inside of the edge of the circle there. Pretty nice result. And Daniel, yeah, just a disappointing par here. It's a hole that isn't always birdied, even by the best players, just because the approach can be tricky if you're not in that perfect spot.
Very solid putt there by Joona, looking to secure his place on the lead card final day. Currently sitting at 13 under with 2 to go. We see Eeku here has 3 birdies in a row, makes it 4.
Once again, solid, right there in the middle. And his putting stroke is looking quite crisp. It definitely wasn't an accident that he had 6 out of 8 from circle 2 in round number 1.
No accident that he came into round 2 as your leader and has held that position really nicely throughout the day, pushing this lead card by a single stroke over Joona at 14 under. We get here to hole number 17. This hole has 2 features which make it actually quite tricky. We'll call it 3 features because there is a low ceiling, high floor, as well as this newly introduced Mando, forcing players to play through the tunnel in a more direct, piercing line. You see the basket tucked way back there due to the very narrow height window, allowing players to glide all the way there. A lot of players will disc up and throw pretty fast. You can hyzer flip, you can flex to make the gap a little bit bigger. You can even throw a roller. So we get to see the preferred shape for these players to hit a very small gap in height.
A lot of the times, as Eeku has a very bad early release, he hasn't missed the Mando. But yeah, as I was saying, a lot of times it's worth it to disc up to a faster disc here than you would normally see on a 104 meter hole. Nobody going mid-range, a lot of fairway drivers, a lot of distance drivers even throwing on this hole. And Joona there, while he throws a good looking line, just difficult to get that height while still staying under the branch.
Daniel as well playing the hyzer flip, and there's the ceiling coming into play. You see the 2 mistakes there, catching both slightly low floor for Joona and the high ceiling for Daniel. We'll see if LEnni is able to craft a line to hit the gap purely. He's played a lot of these overstable forehand flexes, releasing on Anheuser. finding the full S flight, but he too is unable to hit it cleanly. This is a hole that I think honestly not that many players are bogeying, but I would guess very few are birdieing as well. Elias, what do we have?
Same thing as for most of these holes that are kind of tricky to birdie. 19% birdie. That's what we see throughout the entire course. Every time there's a hole that is not easy to birdie, but also not impossible, the birdie rate ends up near that 20%. And as everybody is just kind of scrambling, trying to make their way to the basket, Joona Heinänen will actually have a great look to get a stroke on the card. 18 meters away, definitely not an easy putt, but his putting stroke has been looking good so far.
Oh, and so healthy, I mean, the whole way from the release out of the hand, that just looked so good. And fantastic moment to capitalize on, blowing Elias's mind there a little bit. We get the slow-mo. What do we see, Elias?
Just a great clean release, slight bit of a hyzer, and not only blowing my mind, but I'm already sensing the spoiler comments in the comments. I will tell you that I have not seen this coverage before.
Exciting to come into a blind here and experience it with you guys. Daniel able to secure the par there as he's had a clean back nine along with Joona, both of them still bogey free in these final nine. Eeku with a solid par as well, not the easiest of par saves there, but has been really solid on the green, still holding his tied first position going into the last hole.
And really everybody besides LEnni is looking pretty dialed on the back. A lot of green, Eeku with a bogey, LEnni with a bogey, but rest of all pars and birdies. Moving on to a legendary hole number 18. A couple of great tournaments have gone down on this one, 194 meters. In total, playing much longer as we're going uphill from the tee all the way to the basket. Par 4, there's an OB left that you want to avoid. And the most important thing besides that is going to be just get a lot of distance off the tee. You can be a little bit left of the fairway, a little bit right, on the fairway. As long as you stay on the grass and safe, you're going to have a look at this green, which for the approach is going to be a low thrown flat to hyzer shot, with especially important to finish rather left than right of the basket. A lot of roll away chance if you do finish a little bit too far right.
They're first going to have to nail this tee shot though. Joona has been minty on the back nine so far. We see a very high release, but a very good amount of turn there, and the late stability that is smoked up the hill, even just before that small bush. That is about as good of a drive as you'll see on this hole, and great control at that distance.
Incredible distance. He must have gotten about 145 meters with a pretty steep uphill. So steep you can even see it on camera. And Eeku there, that's kind of the normal great driver you see on this hole, just putting into perspective how far Joona's drive was.
Daniel here getting it really high and releasing on a hyzer angle. Finds a green flag. I think he turned around before even able to see the spotter give that green. He was flirting right on the edge of the line. That slight roll down the hill brought him back in bounds. Another hole that's pretty tricky for LEnni as he'll be fading with the slope, but being to the right side will open up the angle a little bit for his approach, give him a larger gap. We see just how close Daniel there was. Still in play for the birdie.
Very unconventional play, trying to go spike hyzer over everything, and what a result in the circle. No roll away, which is I think the most impressive with that shot landing in such a severe hyzer. And let's see LEnni, more of a traditional low hyzer shot under the branches, and once again hoping for no roll, but that's just not gonna be the case.
And I've always noticed that about Daniel's game. He's not afraid to take lines that others probably wouldn't. When he's confident that it works for him and is a high probability play, he's happy to take these slightly unorthodox lines. Eeku sneaks his way under those branches, but not quite getting the complete push towards the green. Joona with such a short shot here, even fires it long with just a complete standstill. Absolutely crushed this hole, made it look very simple.
That's gonna be for Joona to go 7 under on the back 9. Very clean scorecard. And LEnni for a great finish, unfortunately not the case. He really wishes he had that shot back with the unfortunate roll.
Eeku, the first putt from him that's looked maybe potentially timid with that slope behind on the final hole, knowing that he's in a good spot. I think, of course, while he wanted that birdie, he didn't necessarily need it to be in play tomorrow, but Daniel with a really solid 3 there. And Joona here to close out his back 9. Fantastic delivery.
Great round from Joona, able to shoot kind of a normal front 9, but then really heat up on the back and showing exactly what his biggest strengths are. Great angle control on the distance drivers and a lot of power on that backhand. Really taking control of the lead card here and actually pulling into a 1-stroke lead over Eeku, who got a par there. Also a very solid round. Tied for second is a great position.
No doubt, as we see the standings, our lead card for day 2 is defined. 3 of our existing players with Hjalmar Fredriksson bringing it to the lead card for the Swedes here in Stockholm, going to be carrying a little bit of the weight of the country on his shoulders as we have a very tightly stacked field. I know we often refer to round 2 as moving day, but round 3 is going to define the outcome of this. We appreciate you joining us for this incredible action. You can like, comment, subscribe, or find us on Patreon. We appreciate each and every one of you, and make sure to tune in for the final round of this incredible action.